No live organism can continue for long to exist sanely under conditions of absolute reality. Even larks and katydids are supposed, by some, to dream. Hill House, not sane, stood by itself against its hills, holding darkness within. It had stood for 80 years, and might stand for 80 more. Within, walls continued upright, bricks met neatly, floors were firm, and the doors were sensibly shut. Silence lay steady against the wood and stone of Hill House, and whatever walked there, walked alone. Welcome everyone to Word Wolf Unchained. I'm Bran.
And I'm Lynn.
And this is movie versus book. We haven't really come with a better title. I don't think there is a better title. But this is the interview portion where Lynn and I go through a series of questions and determine if we can have a conversation about a story that's told in movie and book format. Good descriptor?
Good descriptor.
Lynn reads the book, I watch the movie, and we go from there. So what do we do today?
We did, I'm going to say it right. Read it off the book. Haunting of Hill House. Because I even wrote it down wrong in my notes. I keep calling it House on Haunted Hill, but that is not what we did.
So anyways, the synopsis for the book.
Four seekers have arrived at the rambling old pile known as Hill House. Dr. Montague, an occult scholar looking for solid evidence of psychic phenomena, Theodora, his lovely and light-hearted assistant, Luke, the adventurous future inheritor of the estate, and Eleanor, a friendless, fragile young woman with a dark past. As they begin to cope with chilling, even horrifying occurrences beyond their control or understanding, they cannot possibly know what lies ahead, for Hill House is gathering its powers, and soon it will choose one of them to make its own.
Odd.
Yeah.
You kept making faces and pausing, so...
Well, it's because... I don't read the description of things before I read them.
I know. I'm glad I told you that rule.
It doesn't match. It doesn't match.
Alright, so here's mine. Usually I do this from Fandango, but that's not what popped up in my DuckDuck search. That's funny. Anyways. The Haunting weaves the dark tale of a questionably sane young woman in a sinister house which holds a terrifying past. Invited to join anthropologist Dr. Markway, ESP expert Theodora, and probable heir to the estate Luke Sanderson, in order to dispel the near mythical tales that surround the house. Unstable Eleanor Vance agrees to spend a few nights in the house following the death of her mother, as they slowly begin to discover the horrific and seemingly unbelievable tales may hold more truth than the skeptical guest might have previously expected. With a seemingly unstoppable supernatural force lurking in every shadow, the probability of anyone escaping the evil clutch of the cursed mansion seems increasingly remote.
Alrighty then.
Mine didn't really match the movie too terribly much either, if that makes you feel any better.
I'm not sure it does.
All right.
So we've got roughly the same cast of characters, at least. Dr. Montague, Eleanor, Theo, and Luke.
Yeah, the only one that kind of changes, at least in name so far, is Dr. Markway. And it's Markway. Markway. It's a very English way of spelling that. You'd almost expect it to be French, wouldn't you? So this is going to be a bit of a mess because we had organized things and gone through our notes better, our questions better, but apparently your books are haunted and displaced them.
The books aren't haunted.
Neither was Hill House.
I don't think it was. Not really. All right, so
Stop.
Pick a random question, I guess. Were the portrayal of the characters realistic, such as the qualities and character choices?
I don't know, it's kind of hard to say because it's 1963. That I should clarify that I also watched the 1963 version of The Haunting, not the 1999 version. We're going to do that later as a bonus episode. So it's hard for me to tell with that because the acting's kind of bad in general. Because it's 1960s acting, and all the acting was bad then. Or at least the vast majority of it. What was the question again?
Were the portrayal of the characters realistic?
I mean, I suppose so. Because Dr. Marquay in the movie is very... He's not trying to disprove the haunting of the house. He's trying to find supernatural presence. And if he doesn't, that's fine. If he does, fantastic.
Dr. Montague is also trying to find the supernatural presence.
Eleanor's just very dramatic. I didn't like her, so that's hard to tell also. You don't really get a lot of Theo. Luke, I suppose Luke's pretty realistic. So, I mean, I guess for the most part. I mean, God, Eleanor's just so entitled and whiny and just the worst about everything in every way possible.
Entitled?
She's very entitled in the movie. When you first meet her, she's arguing with her sister about taking the car.
Same with the book.
I think they both pitched in with inheritance from their mother, is the implication I get. It's not really made explicitly clear. They're arguing over the car. Mother died, so that's part of the argument. And then, so like at first you think maybe the car was a hand-me-down or an inheritance. But then they talk about both buying half the car or pitching in half. So, but she's very, I never take the car. I should take it. She's staying in her sister's living room, sleeping on the couch. And at the end of the argument, and I understand. But it's the way she says it in the movie that, get out of my room. I know it's your living room, but I'm paying for it. And the husband, and just when she goes to Hill House, she's going there with the intent to just stay there. To, like, she's going to find some way to become part of the staff or marry Luke, whatever she has to do, she's just going to go there, and that's where she's going to live for the rest of her life.
It's a little bit different from the book. They did argue about the car. You would have to really watch it. You wouldn't be able to, though. I'm gonna put this with a pin in it up on the wall right now. I didn't like this movie at all. And it's not even because it's a 1963 movie, because Psycho was perfectly fine. It's just a badly done movie. Anyways, so that's not what we're doing. Did I find the portrayal of the characters realistic? To begin with, based on their setup character, yes, which is not what they're set up as the back on the summary. They're different than what they are on the summary. But in the beginning, yes, I think they are true to character until they get to the house, but I think the house, they start reacting to it so quickly that it's actually difficult to gauge if they're behaving realistically because they're already under the influence of the house.
And I want to say, I'm going to redact on mine a little bit because I couldn't find any of the characters necessarily relatable. You don't really... Eleanor is the main focus of the movie. And it's her interactions with everybody else is the only glimpse you get into them. And Dr. Marquay has the most, probably. but Theo's just mean to her just because. God, it just. No.
Theo kind of does that in the book, too. I mean, it starts off nice, but then I think it's the influence of the house, the fear they're under, the stress of it. She does become more antagonistic. So it's difficult to gauge if they're realistic portrayals or not, because they're under stress and fear the entire time.
Oh, and from the movie, Eleanor's really the only one who seems psychologically impacted by the house. Like, everybody experiences things with the house, but...
Yes, Eleanor is the only one who's psychologically affected by it, yes.
And...
everyone else is just scared.
Like, Theo with her ESP, she uses it to be mean to people, is the impression that I get.
Theo doesn't really have ESP.
I mean, it's implied that there's actually some there in the movie because she makes some correct guesses. And it might just be reading the room, reading the situation. But, like, her first interaction with Eleanor, how could you read off of a person that they have new outfits?
Because in the book, it goes into why Dr. Montague invited these people to the house. And Theo did in an ESP test guess most of the cards right, but it's never really brought up again. It's never really brought up again.
They mention it quite a few times in the movie, so I think it's supposed to actually be a thing.
Because, like, Eleanor was invited along because she had a poltergeist probably in her house when she was younger. It rained rocks inside the house.
Which is in the movie also.
Because they're not his assistants like it says on the back. They're just invited along because they've experienced the supernatural before.
Luke in the movie is there to...
get out of his aunt's hair.
And to watch over Dr. Markway. Because he's not really present in New England with that part of his family, his East Coast family. He's part of the Midwest family. He's the Saxville Baggins. And he has an interest in the house anyway, so the normal Bagginses are hoping that he will, through this experience, end up not wanting the house because they know the proper history of it.
So next question?
I guess.
All right, point to another one. What is your favorite part?
So that was favorite thing, whether it be horror, character, or whatever?
Yes.
I suppose there's one scene that really stands out just because of how nice it's shot. Because, again, like I said, there's nothing really about this movie that I like. But there's a shot near the beginning when Eleanor gets to the house and her suitcase is sitting on the floor and she goes to pick it up and the floor is so reflective. Like, it's almost like a mirror. And you can see her and there's a chandelier kind of hanging over her. It's a really cool looking shot, and maybe supposed to be giving the impression that the house is watching or looming over her or something. But there are a few other scenes near the end that are really, that help with the situation. Like, they have a circular mirror that's kind of convex or concave, whichever way you're looking at it. but it gives this fisheye distortion to the shot as she's running, because the camera's facing the mirror and she's running up to it, so it gives this nice distorted view of things. Couple Dutch angles, and like one of them is with the spiral staircase. Like, it's Dutch angle, so the spiral staircase is like a 30-degree angle or whatever. I didn't measure it, so take that for what it is. It's in that area. And she's standing there and she looks really small in comparison to it because it's forced perspective.
So, your favorite part is also my favorite part, even though yours is cinematically done.
Those are also only the instances. Those are really the only instances of it.
Because my favorite part is just all of Hill House. I love Hill House. The character, the atmosphere that it's described as, the sense of vertigo you get inside the house.
Oh, and there's that too. With the beginning, when Eleanor first gets to the house, there's a few shots that are really good about making the house maybe feel larger than it is. That is this big, huge, imposing force.
Because I love that the house, like, all the angles are wrong. It's just everything about it. I love the house.
It's just something they touch on in the movie, but you don't get a proper feel for it. Like, honestly, if I were making this movie today, even back then maybe, I would have had just ever slight, like a 1 degree angle. Maybe 2. Like, just enough that it triggers your brain, but not so much that you can actually tell. Maybe like moments where that's not very feasible, do a little bit of fisheye lens or something. Just different things to
just never shoot it square.
Yeah, to make your brain go, what is going on here? Without you necessarily... Like, fisheye would be a lot more overt about it. Because
I kept doing that while I was reading, too. When I'd get finished with a descriptive part of the house, I'd visualize how I would shoot it if I was doing a movie.
and that's just... So, you had mentioned that before, so that's why I was thinking about it. And I'm kind of glad you did, so that way I could pay attention for it. Otherwise, I wouldn't have noticed it, and I actually wouldn't have anything that I'd like at all.
I shouldn't have, though, because we're not supposed to talk about it beforehand. You just took forever, and I wanted to talk about it.
Well, I was working on my other stuff that I had to get done. I'm sorry.
Don't bite me.
I'm not biting you.
Talking to the cat.
I know. It's funny, because they can't see.
How did it make you feel?
Go ahead.
I honestly, there were points when I was reading it where I actually did feel a sense of vertigo while reading it. And I could feel the house closing in on the parts where the fear settled in for not the other characters, just for Eleanor, because she was experiencing it differently.
You said earlier, she is the main focus of the book too, right?
Yes,
so you
Eleanor is the main focus of the book. You get everything from her perspective. Yes. And, like, I kind of like Eleanor, not, like, as a person, like, oh, she's great, but I like the perspective from Eleanor where we get to actually feel the effect of the house on her.
Yeah. And I will a little bit. I mean, it's kind of weird doing it in a movie, but... Maybe... See,
that's it. I couldn't figure out how you would do it in a movie.
10% of the movie is her thoughts. Like, it's just her standing on screen. I mean, like, face acting, but it's her thoughts being verbalized. It's yucky. Weird because it's screen.
Yeah. See, that's where I was having the problem, because so much of it is internal in Eleanor that I couldn't figure out how you would do that and without just having voiceover dialogue and a shot of her face.
Like, it could be done pretty decently. Like, I mean, there are some other really fun things. Like, there's a moment where her and Theo gets moved into her room because Dr. Markway doesn't want people to be separated anymore. And Theo and her lay down in their separate beds, which are like 1950s couple beds on TV. They're so close that you could hold hands and touch.
Oh, but when she's holding something's hand and then she wakes up because she thinks it's Theo the entire time, and she wakes up and it's not Theo. Oh my god.
But
that freaked me. That honestly freaked me out.
It's difficult to... I don't know. It's also 1963, so you don't ever actually see her holding anybody's hand. She's just talking to herself about, Theo, hold my hand, don't let go, blah, blah, blah. And she's staring at the wall, and the wall in this scene, or in this bedroom, is like leaves carved into the wall. Like, not just a pattern of like wallpapers, like it's a solid wood wall and it's carved in. And there's this one part that looks like a face. And as she's staring at it, the part that looks like eyes and the mouth get a little bit darker, and like, it could be really fun. It could be really cool. Also, I forgot, this movie's in black and white, so I think that pulls a lot of it out too, in a way, because it's hard to get that gritty, grainy, atmospheric. Anyways, yeah, and she's just talking to herself, Theo, and holding hands, and then I'm going to open my mouth. I can do it. I'm going to scream. I forget what she actually says, but...
Oh, that part, it freaked me out in the book, because she tried to scream, but she couldn't, and she squeezed Theo's hand, and Theo squeezed back, and then when you get to the part where you realize it's not Theo, and you're back on that, she squeezed back. Freaked me out.
But, back on that is... When she does wake up, she's not in her bed. She's in a fainting couch. You know, the one in movies like that where women faint and they fall back on this weird... It's a fainting couch. Women always faint on it in movies, especially the older ones.
Right.
But that's like kind of the freakiest part in the movie of that scene, because she fell asleep in her bed. We saw her go in her bed. And then she's over here, because it's all dark around her, kind of, and just focusing, like, back and forth between the two.
Yeah. No biting. So I guess, in one word, how did it make me feel? I'd have to go with unsettled. It's unsettling.
For me, personally, irritated. Like, not even because of anything directly related to the story. Is fucking Eleanor is just so horrible in the movie. I really... She makes me can't even. I can't odd with her either. Yeah, that's right. I did that.
Oh, I forgot about the nursery, too. The nursery was freaky, too.
The freakiest part with the nursery in the movie is that the doors open when Grace gets there.
Who?
Marquay's wife.
Oh.
Mrs. Marquay.
I didn't write down her name.
Yeah. No, there is a moment at the, maybe in the beginning of the second act. I don't know. There's not very definitive breaks.
No,
acts. But there's, Marquay calls everybody to the nursery, and standing outside of it, and it's very cold there. It's like, this is the heart of the house.
Yes. And it's cold there, and even though they feel the cold, it doesn't read on the temperature gauge as a difference in temperature. And that's creepy.
Don't remember if they have a
and
temperature
the
gauge.
two cherubs on either side of the hallway.
Oh yeah, that doesn't really come into play.
That look, and their eyes meet in the cold spot.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and Eleanor says that the cold spot feels deliberately cold because everything is worse if something is looking at you. And you got the freaky little cherubs staring in the cold spot.
There are cherubs and other statues all over the house, but they don't actually play that much into it. Not as much as they should.
These are the only ones that are actually mentioned, and I think it's, from what I understand, it's because they kind of stand out in the hall because it's only a place where they're at in that hall, because otherwise it's just a long, flat, blank hallway. Like, the doors don't even recede. It's just a tunnel.
Huh. Nice. Yeah.
I told you I loved this house.
I want to read this book. I was pointing up here. Yeah, there.
What is the philosophy or message behind the book?
Movie.
Themes, metaphors, symbolisms.
I mean, the only thing I can really pick up on is is something actually what it is, or is your preconceived ideas what cause that to happen? So like with this, they're kind of going in with the impression that it's haunted.
Like, they know it's haunted, but they don't really know what they're doing there till they get there. Dr. Montague was very vague about it in his invitation.
And like we don't get any of that in the movie. It's just opening monologue, Markway talking with Mrs. Sanderson. Isn't that their name? The woman who actually owns the property.
Yeah, Sanderson.
And then he gets his lease to stay there for a few weeks. And then we jump to Eleanor, and then she goes to the house. So there's not really any in-depth collection of people, probably like there would be now. Like if it was now, you'd get probably Markway getting the lease, and then a little breakdown of everybody getting their letter from him or whatever, or him going to visit them, whatever needed to happen. But it's the idea of preconceived notions, and if that influences how you perceive a situation versus not. So like as a control, as a scientist, he should have, well, I suppose Luke kind of stands in for that, but he has a history with the house too. So like if you had somebody who had no history with paranormal, didn't know anything about this house, bringing them in, which would actually make the story maybe even more interesting. It could be an additional interesting aspect to the story, especially if that's the person who's affected by the house.
Yeah. I think the one quote from the book sums it up is it's no physical danger exists. It attacks the mind, and the victim or the person does their own harm, because what it's doing is it's attacking it's eliminating self-doubt, because there's more people there, because you can't say it was my imagination if other people are seeing it too. It's the shared thing happening.
The shared experience. And like, see, that's, I feel there's a lost opportunity with using those, because you shared a couple quotes with me before too.
I did share these ones.
And that one and other thing, I think there was a missed opportunity for some of these quotes, because I wrote some down too. Because I've got one about labels, which kind of plays into my thing, if I can find it real quick. People always want to put easy label on things, even if it's meaningless. And that's, I think that kind of plays into what I was saying, the preconceived ideas. That as people, we have to apply a label to something so we can better understand it. And with all the things that happened with the house, historically, and things continuing to be weird with it, kind of, it would be The Haunting. Yeah,
you've got to be able to put it in its box, and we become very uncomfortable when it doesn't fit there.
Yes.
Nailed it. But no, I think the one quote I shared with you, the fear is the relinquishment of logic, the willing relinquishment of reasonable patterns, and you either yield to it or fight it. You can't meet it halfway.
And I really like that quote. I'm going to steal that for something.
Don't know what, but it's a good one. I think it sums it up really well. And I think it sums up what the characters do, too, because Eleanor yields to it while the others all fight it. They don't give in to that fear. But Eleanor, I think it's because she doesn't really have a base in the outside world like everyone else does.
Yeah, she doesn't have that anchor.
She doesn't have the anchor, yes. She gives into it, because it's easier.
Because that's, like I was saying with her entitlement, like, she goes there expecting to just stay there, and it doesn't matter what it takes. So she just gives herself to the house.
She doesn't in the book, but she doesn't have a home, so she doesn't have an outside anchor. She doesn't really have friends, and she doesn't like her sister.
So on that too, in the movie,
and it is easier to give in than to fight. It's the easier path, and a person like Eleanor is going to take the easier path.
So on that with Eleanor, just because does she lie about having an apartment in the book?
She does.
Okay. Because she does there too, or in the movie also, and I don't know, it's one of those things is in the movie, like if it was just a movie and there wasn't a book where it had already happened, it would feel like something that was just forced in there just because.
Because they kind of,
I mean, it still does in the movie, but
when the characters all first meet, it's kind of like they're playing two truths and a lie, but not really. When they're describing themselves, they're saying some true things, but then some that are lies, but they're just so obviously lies.
Yeah,
like,
oh man, that would have been a much better scene than the dinner scene in the movie.
Theodore, she talks about her fight with her roommate and her apartment in her store, and then she also says that she's a princess. And she's run away from her father, and this outlandish story.
Yeah.
And Eleanor, she says that she's got her apartment, and she describes the lions on the mantle and the white curtains, things that would sound normal in truth, and then she says that she's, a courtesan. And
which is probably more true than the other.
And I forget what Luke says, but he also has some truths. And then a lie, but it's just such an outlandish lie. And I think the fact that they've all kind of
it's a very ice-breaking scene, though, too.
It is. It's a good ice-breaking scene. I liked it, but I think the fact that they've all kind of non-verbally agreed to truths and a lie helps sell Eleanor's lies as truth.
Because you don't get that in the movie. That scene in the movie is a dinner scene, and Eleanor and Theo have already met each other, and they're trying to get to dinner, and they get lost in the halls, and that's, and so you have a shared moment with them, going, oh my god, what's going on? The house is haunted, right from the beginning, kind of, and then we go deeper into Eleanor's thoughts, I think, there, and then he opens the door and he explains the architecture of the house. No, it's later when that happens. But he's, oh, that's weird. The door must have shut itself. I just opened it 5 minutes ago. Come on in. It's time for dinner. Blah, blah, blah. Miss Dudley's there trying to explain her situations. This actually could be a fairly comical thing if you were trying to make a horror comedy. Because Eleanor gets the explanation, and then with Theo, Eleanor and Theo are just talking while Miss Dudley is trying to explain her rules. And then Eleanor's like, yes, we get it. Whatever she says, I forget. And then Miss Dudley kind of smiles like, yeah, okay. Yeah. And then it happens again at the dinner scene. But you pretty much get Dr. Markway explaining to Luke who Theo is, and then her piggybacking off of it a little bit, and then kind of explaining a little bit with Eleanor's situation, why she's there. And then she's like, no, Mother just said that the children were throwing stones at the house because the story with the poltergeist, like making fun of us or whatever, mocking us.
Yes.
And like those might be switched, I think, a little bit. So Eleanor's thing happens first, and then Theo's. And then while that's being explained, then Eleanor has an outburst of something with her mother, and because that's kind of a little bit of a thing there, but it's not explored deep enough to be a theme. It's a bumper sticker slogan.
Because I actually because Theo and Eleanor do meet first, because they arrive at the house before everyone else. Eleanor arrives first, which I think is important, why the house also gets a hold on her, but
yes,
beside the point. I like, because they meet first, and Theo doesn't want to be inside the house, so they go outside, and they pretend they're having a picnic, and they make up fake relatives, and they call each other cousins, and having a jolly old time. And I both love and hate that moment in the book, because it makes me really like both characters, because it's such a fun scene. The way they're using this, laughing and playing like they were children to break the tension and the fear. Mm-hmm. And it makes me hate Theo all the more.
When she
yes.
Mean. Well, and see, that would be a little bit better to show that she's not actually mean. Because, like, as soon as she gets there, she's kind of mocking towards Eleanor, and some of it's Eleanor, too, just being like, well, how did you know that? And very accusatory, and maybe it's just the actress's delivery, too.
Maybe. That
could be. It's not good acting. For the time, I'm sure it was great, but
I don't think you're supposed to like Mrs. Dudley, but I see her.
She hardly even plays a role in it.
I see her importance because when all the characters, the original 4 characters, interact with her, she's got like set lines, like she's an NPC in a video game. And I set lunch at 1. I clear at 2. Dinner's at 6. I'm not here. Dark. I leave before dark. It's all she ever says.
Just leave it. I'll clean it up in the morning. Breakfast at 9.
But then when Eleanor starts to lose it after Dr. Montague's wife shows up, she hides, and she hears Mrs. Dudley and Dr. Montague's wife having an actual conversation.
Yeah.
That has nothing to do with lunch at 1 and leaving before dark. And
that probably should have been probably could have been in there to help the story in the movie.
It's part of what separates Eleanor out from everyone else and sets her into this forgotten place, which I think is where, because at the same time she's also overheard Luke and Theo talking, and Dr. Montague and his wife's assistant talking, and none of them mention Eleanor. She slips into this forgotten place, like out in the world she feels forgotten.
Which is an interesting thing of her kind of like foreshadowing her becoming a part of the house.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, let's do an easy one next. Is the setting a character of the story?
Yes.
Very, very much.
It's definitely, well, for the movie it's definitely implied that it's supposed to be. Again, it's hard to say with it being 1963 and the limited special effects, and it was still a period of time where they were beginning to understand the aspects of cinema and how it can be used to tell a story, and that it was very different from theater, and it's like those pieces were on the table and they were starting to get it put together. Maybe they had the border of the puzzle.
Yeah.
So some things are there, but some things aren't. And just in our conversation, I'm thinking like, oh man, that would be great. But you get it through Dr. Markway definitely talking about the house, not as a structure, but more as if it were its own person. Yes. And it's a very natural, like, he hasn't even put any thought into it. It's just how he thinks of the house.
Yeah, all the characters refer to it as if it's its own entity. They all call it Hill House, like it's its name. And Eleanor even thinks, because she doesn't, she thinks of Theo, the casual way she just says Hill House, like she's daring it to do something.
Yeah.
Saying, notice me, but Eleanor's too afraid to say it.
And mostly you get it from the external scenes, or the external shots of the house, which are probably matte painting, but that's fine. But there's all these windows, and even with everything from today, you get the impression that it's supposed to be staring at her, and you do kind of get that feeling, even though everything is like all the windows are blacked out most of the time. but there'll be certain shots of like just a specific tower of the house, or well, tower's not necessarily right, but
it is right. They call it tower in the book. It's called the tower.
I'm talking about the movie though. Oh. Like there is a tower thing, but it's a Victorian style house, so I don't think tower is necessarily accurate. Like you'll get a shot from there sometimes, or like somebody standing on the roof looking down on her.
I love so much the description of this house. I can't even. Like, even from the beginning when she's just walking into the house to her room, where she comes in, and on the first level, everything's ornate and carved, and then when you get to the second level, it's like, she says it's like the builders realized that there was something wrong with the house and wanted to finish as quickly as possible because nothing's ornate anymore. It's just like I said, the hallway and the doors aren't even recessed.
Yeah.
It's just a straight, plain hallway. There's none of the intricacy of the lower level.
I'm going to take a moment to comment on it because obviously right now we're probably not going to get to the summary part. We're already 40 some minutes in. But with the way we're getting into these questions, I don't think we really need to do a summary.
Yeah, we're kind of getting into this one pretty well.
But so you've got the exterior shots, and they're great for like this is a looming presence over you, and some of the shots are really good at making her seem small, and like not even like just a person compared to a house, like an ant compared to a house, small. And then you go inside, and there's the entry room. Kinda, I don't know what it would actually be called.
The parlor, the foyer.
Parlor, maybe. I don't know. It's like
foyer,
like a sunroom on houses now. Because it doesn't seem like a room, and then she gets the actual entry door, so it might even just be an overhang porch or something that is just so overgrown.
The veranda.
Yes. That is just so overgrown that it seems like its own room, which thinking back on that now changes it a little bit for me. But then she goes into the actual room and the actual entry of the house, and it's close in shots. It's very cluttered. Like there's most of the house, there's so many things in each shot that I don't think it's setting the right atmosphere, because it's almost like looking at the Addams' house.
Yeah.
At that same period of time, that there's one shot where there's a statue in the foreground and a pillar, and the wallpaper or whatever, the wall is so ornate, and the banister of the stairs, and just there's just so much going on, and it's so cluttered that it doesn't even feel claustrophobic or anything. It's just a mess.
I like what you said, the shot where they make her seem small. You said like an ant. I think maybe kind of like a child, because I get this...
Maybe a child.
Because the house... The history of the house is it was built by this man for his 2 daughters and himself. And the 2 daughters lived there up until he died, and then they were taken away. And I think... Because Theo keeps saying those poor kids, what would have been like to grow up here, to be left alone here,
that makes more sense.
In this heaviness. And I think that the house actually wants children, because Eleanor starts to behave more childishly.
Yes, she is very childish.
The longer she's there.
And that plays into the entitlement a little bit. And
I do think she has a childish mindset to begin with, because she's often off in a dreamland, and she doesn't really know what to do with herself. She's got a kind of childish mindset to begin with, and then she just becomes more childish the longer she's in the house. Like, she eventually starts running around and hiding from people when they're looking for her. And she behaves like a child.
I'm glad you said that. Puts Eleanor in the movie into perspective for me. She's like a person pretending to be a child who's never interacted with a child, doesn't even know what a child is.
But I do think I kind of get. To me, it feels like the house wants a child there because I don't think it wanted those children to be taken away. And both these sisters, when the dad died, fought over the house because I don't think they wanted to leave either.
So I'm gonna touch on that real quick a little bit because in the movie, it's not only Abigail, but Abigail's the only one that is spoken about. Excuse me. So the movie starts off with a brief monologue, like a real quick monologue, and then it goes to credits, and then it continues it. It's weird. An evil old house, some people would call haunted, is like an undiscovered country waiting to be explored. Hill House stood for 90 years, and might stand for 90 more. Silence lay steadily against the wooden stone of Hill House, and whatever walked there, walked alone. So that's the opening monologue. And then the rest of the monologue is a brief history of the house. So it talks about Hugh Crane and his family and building the house. Miss Crane was riding in her carriage and something happened and she crashed into a big tree. Abigail grew old, and so like she never moved out of the house.
Right, she didn't. She died there, but she had a little companion who lived there.
Which might be why it's kind of overlooked. Abigail grew old there. She hired a companion to pretty much a caretaker, as we would call them today. And I put in her knocking on the wall as she was dying because it comes back later in the movie.
Eleanor's mom?
Abigail.
Eleanor.
I know Eleanor has an attachment to that too, but Abigail has her cane and she's knocking on the wall calling for a companion. Abigail died and left the companion the house. And then the companion hung herself off of this big spiral staircase. I'm guessing it's supposed to be in the library, but it's never really made clear.
It is in the library.
It's not clear in the movie. Like, it's just a staircase. It's like... So, in the movie, and this would be really cool if they did, it's kind of like the Winston house, or not Winston, pew 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 guns, those people. Winchester. It's kind of like the Winchester house, where Miss Winchester just a stairway up to a door, and there's a brick wall behind it. Like, that would have been kind of cool to do, and you kind of get that impression a little bit with the movie, but it's not done strongly enough for it to be an actual thing. Hold that thought. But you mentioning the two daughters, I think it's the atrium, kind of like a greenhouse thing.
Conservatory.
There's a statue grouping of a man and 3 women and a dog. And they don't talk about a second daughter. So it's... They go into a few random, like, mythological characters a little bit. And then the man is Mr. Kane. Obviously, one of the women is his wife. The other woman is Abigail. One of the other women is Abigail. And then the last one is the companion. And then Eleanor is compared to the companion.
They do compare Eleanor to the companion as well. But now I'm thinking maybe from the perspective of the house again. Weird.
You're also into architecture, so I suppose that makes
sense. Abigail does die there. And the house does try to get people to stay. Maybe it just wants that other daughter back, too.
Maybe.
Because the companion doesn't
Maybe
die
it's just
there.
calling out for its family.
Houses need their families. But the staircase is in the library, but Eleanor won't go in there up until she's...
Cuckoo pants?
Yeah. Because the smell of it, no one else can smell it, though.
And
I think that plays into the child thing again, because children aren't really supposed to go in libraries. They're something that adults would, libraries aren't for children, because books, they didn't really have children's books like we do now. Books were a valuable, prestigious thing, and they didn't really make children's books like you do now.
At the time that the house was probably built, it was a rare thing to be able to read, which is why secretary was such an important job. I just had to throw that in there. I'm sorry.
Did they talk about the book that they found that Cain made for his daughters?
Yes, but no. So Luke finds it at one point, and he reads a passage from it, and they make a point to show the illustrations. And then later on, when Eleanor is crazy, they show a frame, or they show a page in it. That's a different page, I think. But I didn't care enough to pay attention to it to see if it mattered.
How fucked up kind of man is that to make that book and then read it to your small children?
I think they do. I think they mentioned something about the library having a smell, because later on, after Eleanor concedes to the house, she runs to the library, to the staircase, that shot that I described earlier.
Yeah.
And in her internal thought, she does mention something about it not smelling anymore.
Because that's the only time she goes in it, is in the end when she goes running in.
And whatever they walked alone.
So how did you find the pacing?
I suppose that's a positive. Overall, it was paced fairly decently. I mean, I've described the opening sequence, monologue, Marquay, Eleanor, she gets to the house. And then you have a little bit of daytime with her and Theo. And then dinner, going to night one. And then it's kind of like Paranormal Activity. So it's like night one, and then you have the next day, and then night two, then the next day, then night three.
Oh no,
then
they lose track of time. They only know it's
Well,
Saturday, so the wife shows up.
That's the way the movie's presented to us. So, I mean, pacing-wise, for a 2-hour 1963 movie, I'm shocked by that. It doesn't feel like a 2-hour long movie. It's like an hour and 50 minutes, but like an hour and 50 minutes then meant something because you didn't have 20 minutes fucking credits at the end.
Yeah.
So it didn't feel like a 2-hour long movie, even when I was paying attention the second time watching it, kind of. And then the third and a half time watching it to take notes. The first time I kind of half-assed pay attention because it did have a problem of grabbing me and keeping me captivated. And it's not a problem of the time period of the movie, because I had no problem with Psycho.
Yeah.
Which was a couple years earlier, but like overall it does go fairly decently. There are a couple moments where it's kind of like and those are probably moments where I pulled out my tablet and started playing around a little bit.
So the book, while no part of it was slow, the pacing was good throughout. None of it was slow. The beginning was comparatively slow up until the point that they get to the house.
Yeah.
Once they get to the house, it picks up just enough that you can feel that pace shift. But I did like the pacing throughout. It was well paced.
Nope.
Once they were in the house, couldn't put it down.
Yeah.
But I loved it. Honestly, I'd probably, if I went to Hill House, I'd be stuck there.
Oh, me too, probably.
I love this house.
Because, like, the clutterness of it feels, even though I haven't read the book, it feels unnatural to the house. It doesn't feel like it should be cluttered with just a bunch of shit. Just because these people were wealthy and they could buy stuff. Like, and to speak to the history of the house and when it was built, which is, when was this book written? And does it do the 90 years and 90 years more?
No. But it does say, I think it's 80.
It's got to be pre-80.
No, the years.
Yeah.
Like you're saying 90?
Oh, yeah. But, like, at that time, it wouldn't be these random knickknacks and stuff. Like, I could understand the walls maybe being a little bit...
It's 59.
I think that's right. I could understand the walls being busy, and like I said, there's a lot of cherub carvings around the house. I think the one we're going to watch together later, the 99 remake, definitely plays with that. But it, because of when it was built and the fact that nobody's really lived there since Abigail.
Yep, it had stood for 80 years and might stand for 80 more.
So the
monologue is
built
really...
in, like, 1870?
Yeah, the monologue is really just the
Does
opening.
that seem fairly accurate to the timing?
I think so.
For what the house is supposed to be? So, like, people in 1870 wouldn't have all this random crap. Abigail wouldn't buy a bunch of junk because, like, white porcelain lions to just put on her mantelpiece just because. Things were done with intention then.
She only mentions the lions because she drives by a house with actual stone lions out front.
She
shows,
does in the movie too.
I think it shows part of her childishness again.
I just used it because it was relevant to the book, but when she's talking about her apartment, it's these things that she bought to put on her mantelpiece. And you wouldn't really have that in 1870.
Tchotchkes, bric-a-brac.
Yeah, you wouldn't really have that kind of stuff, but that's kind of what's in the house. It's very Adams, 1960s Adams house. Because I don't even think the 90s Adams house was that cluttered and disheveled. Anyways, next.
Because the house itself doesn't really have a style, a particular style. It's like, you want to say it's this, but it's also, you can't. Because no part of it is really entirely anything.
And that's fine. That's different from what I'm talking about, though. Like, your whole, like, most of the exterior of the house could be Victorian, but you have, like, what's another house style?
Random colonial.
Yeah, random colonial, like... The majority of the house is Victorian, but the front of it is colonial and looks like a plantation. Or, like, that's different than, like, just knickknacks and bric-a-brac and just statues all over the place. Next.
Last question. Would you rewatch or reread this book and or movie?
On my own, I would not rewatch this movie. I am tempted to have you kids watch it, but I want to wait until we watch the 99 one to see if it might be a little bit better. Because I definitely want our kids to watch more classic stuff, you know, all the way back to 1920s when films started, because it's important. I watched some of that stuff as a child, but I strayed away from it because it's not new and shiny, and I don't want them to have that mentality.
Yeah.
So on my own, no. I'll compare the two when we do the bonus episode and see how I feel and go from there. Hopefully I never have to watch this movie.
So, I don't like scary movies. Horror, not my thing, as I've said in many other episodes. But I do want to watch this movie.
And we'll say in every episode going forward.
Probably. Probably.
That's okay.
But I want to watch this movie because I want to see the house. I'm going to be disappointed. I know I am. But I want to see how it's done. But the question, will I reread the book? Yes, we're going to buy it.
Yeah, we're going to buy it. I want to read it. I am working on writing some of my own stuff. And I definitely want to focus on more atmospheric and tonal things than just horror for the sake of horror. Like, I want to try to genuinely scare the crap out of people.
This one very much, I had to keep reminding myself that it's a library book and I cannot write in it. Because I wanted to make just so many notes.
So
yes, this is a reread. It's a one I'm going to watch. Even though I normally don't do these kind of films.
Or even books. So, I mean, this is good for you as an avid book reader because it pushes you outside of your comfort zone.
Everything pushes me outside of my comfort zone.
That's because for other reasons. It's still within your preferred genre, though, generally. Yeah. Oh, I forgot. I wanted to start doing that at the beginning. Anyways, thanks for listening. Give some rates and reviews. Let's start boosting some numbers, people, please. All 5 of you. It's funny, but I'm not really doing anything to actively promote right now. I think we've definitely found a good course for what we're doing here. We might even be able to entirely cut out the summary altogether.
I definitely think we can for this one. I don't know if it's maybe the different, better questions or because we're more enthusiastic for this book.
I'm not enthusiastic about this movie, so
I'm
that's not it at all.
enthusiastic for this book, though.
I think these questions just present a better conversation aspect. We forgot to rate if this was pass or fail for the conversation.
I'm going to say it's probably a pass.
Mostly a pass. I think, as I've said before in some of the other ones, when it comes to different multiple adaptations, I want to try to use Rotten Tomatoes with the audience score. But for whatever reason, neither of these movies are on Rotten Tomatoes.
I don't know.
I don't know either. So I went off of IMDb score. 63 version was a 7.5. The 99's like a 6 something, 5 something. I don't remember offhand. So that was part of the reason why I chose this. Also, I kind of cheated a little bit, and the 63 is supposed to be more faithful to the book.
It was. There was definitely a lot.
Like a name change and a couple of actually very crucial scenes, but not so crucial that it...
And then some minor ones, too. Like, Theo had to go in her room because Dr. Montague didn't want him to be in separate rooms. In the book, her room is trashed, and there's blood on the floor and blood on her clothes because she has to wear Eleanor's clothes, too, which I think is also important, and I should have said earlier, because it adds to the Eleanor feeling replaced, because now Theo is actually wearing her clothes.
I guess we're not ending this yet.
I forgot. Well, there's just so much.
When we said that too, I wasn't expecting to not have the summary, so I pulled back. I pulled that punch a little bit, quite a bit. The reason why he has them stay in the same room on the second night going forward is because we're focused on the girls in the movie, and they experience a banging on the wall, and Eleanor thinks it's Theo messing with her and bangs back and tells her to be quiet, and then they have a connected bathroom, and she runs through the bathroom into Theo's room, and then they realize that the banging's happening And by this point, the bangings moved down the hall. So this wasn't either of us. This is something else. And Dr. Marquay and Luke, Dr. Marquay sees a dog run past his door. And then he goes and gets Luke, and they chase the dog outside.
And then they can't get back in.
And yeah, he says that. We don't actually see anything with it.
Yes, they say that too. It's kind of happens in the book. Eleanor doesn't think it's Theo. Theo wakes up calling for Eleanor. Because Eleanor hears it, but I think she's kind of in that in between sleep and awake stage.
So it's
up until Thea calls
happening?
Her name, and then she gets out of bed and runs into her room, and then they're both in Theo's room watching the door like it's being pushed in, and the room gets cold, and there's banging, and the men don't hear it. Like, they don't hear any sounds at all until they're just back in front of the door and all the noises have stopped. The only noise they hear is Eleanor and Theo calling out yelling at the door and, go away.
When the boys come in, do they realize that they were maybe a little weird and start laughing about it?
It's not mentioned.
Okay. Because they do in the movie. We're just being silly girls.
Oh, do the girls do that?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I can't remember now. They might. They do say just us being silly girls.
Okay. The house banging becomes Dr. Marquay knocking on the door, and then they go, maybe it was just you banging on the door and we didn't understand what was going on. No, we were just chasing a dog that I saw, and I went and got Luke. But that's the reason why everybody has to be partnered, is so that way they...
That's when the book did it better.
The shared experience thing.
The book did it better because Theo's room gets trashed and blood in her clothes and stuff, and I think it's important that she ends up wearing Eleanor's clothes.
I don't know, we could probably have like a 3-hour-long conversation over this.
We probably could. I love this book. It's so good.
Anyways, let's try this again. So, thank you for listening. Do all the things, I don't really have a social media site yet that I'm doing with this. I might take it to Reddit, because Reddit's a lot easier for me to work with. Anyways, do me a favor. Share word of mouth, even if you're liking what we're doing here. Rate and review, whatever that is. Give me some stars and say something nice. Or honest. Say something honest. I'd much rather something honest than you just saying something because I want you to. Yeah? Do you got anything else?
No.
Wrap it up, boys! Toodles.
Toodles.